Hello guys, welcome back to another video. Today I have the pleasure of interviewing Travis Braden. Is that how I pronounce it?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Thank you for being on here.
Absolutely, buddy. Anytime.
Yeah, I really like doing these interviews and stuff. It's a lot of fun. So
Yeah, no, this is cool stuff.
yeah, so I guess I'll get started with asking you the question. So first up, I want to ask you how did you get like started in racing? Because I know you do racing and
Yeah, no, that's a pretty interesting question for me, just because my kind of start in racing was a little bit unique, and um, I started. No one in my family had ever raced anything before, so I wasn't brought into it by a family member or anything like that, and I actually grew up in West Virginia on a farm, and I had a four-wheeler and stuff like that from the time I was able to walk pretty much. And I wanted to race, but I wanted to race like Supercross or something like that when I was a kid. And so I was pretty serious about that. And then when I was about 7 or 8 years old, my parents bought me a go kart that they had heard about. There was a racing series that was halfway local, and we could go race. So that's how I got started, was just racing go karts, and they were on dirt tracks, not pavement tracks, and I was just kind of for fun. It wasn't really a very serious go kart. It was almost like a go kart you could buy it from Walmart or something, but it had a little bit of a beefed up engine and some slick tires, and it was relatively fast, and that's how I got started.
yeah, it must be like pretty fun racing because me and my brother, we both really want to get into racing, so we think that would be really cool. And actually
Yeah,
wondering, do you have any tips on getting into racing?
yeah. I mean, I would say the biggest thing. I don't know where you're located, but if you could find some sort of go karting thing, a series or a track that races a lot that's near where you're from, something that's easy to get into, it's not too far away, that you would have some people that live nearby that could, communicate with you and help you get started, and it wouldn't be very costly, compared to doing something where you had to travel a lot more. So, because it's hard. I mean, when you start racing, you have to have some sort of a vehicle to get from the track to your house, and a trailer to put all your stuff in. So, it's not easy. So something that's relatively close to home, and maybe if you had a friend that was somehow involved in it or wanted to help you get started, that could help you go the first few times and just get your feet wet. That'd be my best advice, just starting out as a kid.
Hmm. Yeah, um, it would. My really, I don't really want to get into racing as much because now that I've been interviewing people, I kind of want to get into broadcasting and stuff. But my brother thinks it would be really cool to start racing.
Yeah. Yeah, both sides of it are a lot of fun. I feel like, what's really the most fun about racing is, just sorry about that. What's most fun about racing is just um, the experience. You meet a lot of people and you have a lot of relationships, and being able to go to the races. So even if you were on that side of it, it's still a lot of fun, and meet a lot of really cool people in racing.
Yeah, yeah, maybe I could commentate you racing someday. That would be pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah, heck yeah, I go racing anytime I can usually. So absolutely.
Yeah. So talking of talking about what I just said about commentating someday. Do you think that any day? Well, actually, what would you say? Do you have any goals for your career, like going into racing?
I would say probably my biggest goal in racing would just be to be able to be a part of it at a high level, for a long period of time. Um, because it's hard. I mean, my whole career I've been really fortunate. I've always been able to be in competitive situations and compete for wins and championships. But um, it's a perfect example is right now. I just won essentially the biggest race in short track racing in 2019 in December, less than a year ago, with the Snowball Derby. And I would say that my career is far from secure. At any moment, you could be derailed and have nothing going for you at all. So that's my biggest goal, is just to keep working towards being in a situation where I, can essentially be my own brand and have my own team and those kinds of things, where I can always be a part of racing and have an impact on it and compete for wins and all those things, and hopefully just make a positive overall impact on racing.
Mm. So actually, I actually noticed in your Instagram description, you said you were like the 2019 Snowball Derby champion, and then you were just talking about it. So I wanted to ask you about that. Like, what about that?
Yeah. I don't know how much you know about the Snowball Derby, but or like just short track, late model racing as a whole. But there's kind of the grassroots level of stock car racing today is late models, they call them. And so I've been doing late model racing for the past almost 9 years, I guess now. And that's a very wide scope of motorsports, because you have, local tracks all over the country that guys can go race out on a weekly basis, just racing at one track. And you have, little regional touring series. Some are bigger than others. And then you have some one-off events like the Snowball Derby, All-American 400, which is in Nashville, Tennessee, those types of things. And those are extremely, competitive, really, really historic, big events. And, so those are kind of like what your goal is if you really spend a lot of time in short track racing. That's where you want to end up, and you want to be able to compete in those races. And so actually, last year, 2019, was the first year I ever got a chance to start the Snowball Derby. It was my first time starting that race. And, just, again, coming from my background, I didn't have a family that was involved in racing, didn't have a lot of money or anything behind me to really, get me up the ranks. And just to be a part of it in a competitive ride last year was a really cool experience for me, something that I wasn't sure I'd ever accomplish. And then to go out and win the race is just, something that's really big. And I feel like, one of the things I take a lot of pride in is my career being, one of the guys that didn't have a lot to get started, and then be doing pretty well for myself as far as competition side of things. It's cool just to see my team and I win that race. If you look at the Snowball Derby, the last 10 years, all the other 9 winners over the last 10 years are now racing in the NASCAR Cup Series at some capacity. So, just to be one of the guys that's nowhere near that level yet, I would love to be at that level one day in my career, but nowhere near that. And over the past decade, our team is the only team to ever accomplish that wasn't a Cup caliber team. So I take a lot of pride in that stuff, and that was a big deal for us. And I felt like it was really a big deal for short track racing, just to kind of show that the little teams can still beat those big names and still compete with them.
Yeah, it would be pretty cool for you if you got to the cup level someday. I'd definitely be rooting for you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That'd be a lot of fun, and I would love to. My goal would be, if I was ever able to race in NASCAR, would be to still spend a lot of time racing at the short track ranks. I feel there's a huge disconnect today between short track racing and NASCAR, and I think that's a lot of where people say NASCAR has struggled to keep its audience and to keep its audience growing and those sort of things. And I think it's a lot because of that disconnect. Your fan base has to start growing before you get to NASCAR, because the reality of it is, in NASCAR you typically only have a handful of teams that are going to compete for wins, right? So
Yeah.
if you don't make a name for yourself before you get there, it's really hard to make a name for yourself in NASCAR, because you have Kevin Harvick and Denny Hamlin and all those guys that are pretty consistently going to be hard to beat, So it's really hard to make a name for yourself at that level. You need to do it earlier on. But I think if you don't have these NASCAR drivers competing at the short track ranks, it makes it hard for them to grow a fan base, because when Kyle Busch comes, for instance, and he'll run the Snowball Derby and other short track races, it brings a lot of new fans eyeballs to the races, and it makes better opportunity for people like me to make an impression on those fans and build their support.
So like kind of like while we're kind of on the top of, you were talking about short track racing earlier. I was wondering what we have Tony Stewart's his racing series. I was wondering what your like kind of thoughts are on that.
I think that's really cool. I'm not 100% sure what the whole idea is there yet. I know it's obviously called the Superstar Racing Experience, and the goal is to have a lot of famous, popular drivers that will attract an audience. It's kind of more exhibition style racing. Everyone's in an equal car. There's no advantage for one car to the next, and so I think it's a really great opportunity. What I thought I understood going into it was that they wanted to basically have half the field be very well known, superstar drivers at whether it's IndyCar or Formula One or NASCAR or whatever, and then have a mixture of those guys with some, up and coming guys or short track racers, for example, that maybe have a big following and a lot of success in short track world, but don't have it in NASCAR or wherever, to kind of mix all that together and showcase what the whole sport of motorsports has to offer, not just what the famous guys have to offer, right? And so far I've seen they've announced a lot of these very well known and famous drivers from the highest ranks, but I'd be really interested to see, hopefully they add some short track guys. It'd be cool to see some guys that I raced against a lot get a chance to race in that series. I think it would actually bring a lot more to it to have that, because I think people would love to see those new faces, new personalities, new driving abilities mixed in with those drivers that they've seen on TV for 20 years and they know a lot about. They would love to see that mixture, I think, and that'd put on a great show.
Yeah, I think it will be pretty cool. Do you think that you could ever possibly try any? Do you think you're ever gonna possibly try any of those races in the SRX series?
I really don't know. I'd be glad to get involved with it. I don't really know how to get involved with it. I don't know anyone that's been part of it. So, but yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying is I really think that it'd be great to have guys like myself and guys that I race with be a part of it once or twice at the least, just so the audience can see what, for instance, I race short track late models. So the audience would see, hey, that's a guy that races those. Maybe I want to go and watch one of those races somewhere. I don't know anything about that. And they might go and they might follow it. Or you might have someone that does, amateur, some sort of road racing that's not televised, but it's kind of like the short track pavement racing of road racing. People might say, wow, that's a really neat guy that we just watched race against, whoever. I want to go look him up and see where he races and maybe go see him race. So I think that would really help all of motorsports. Again, it goes back to connecting the audience, because NASCAR and all these the premier series have the advantage of having live TV audiences with millions of viewers, but you need to find a way to connect those viewers to the up and coming drivers, because that's the only way, in my opinion, to actually expose them to all that before they get in NASCAR. Because like I said earlier, you really only have a handful of guys that are going to win and be talked about on TV once they get in NASCAR, for example. So that you really need to build their fan base before they get there.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, that is pretty true. Kind of all these kind of like series is getting mixed up to kind of get the other series a little attention. But
Yeah.
yeah, but kind of getting off the topic of the Tony Stewart series, but I actually have some notes right here. So I was wondering, since racing, it's also a really fun thing, but it could also be a really hard thing. So I was wondering if you kind of like, for you, what is the hardest thing of, about racing?
I would say the hardest thing about it, I mean, if you're trying to progress or if you're struggling to get where you need to be, the hardest part is always the financial side of it and the sponsorship side of it, because it's it's one of those things. The winning drivers and the most competitive teams and all that, they have the most value to a sponsor, so they're already at an advantage in terms of performance, and they're going to make it harder for you to get the sponsorship support because they're going to take it. And so they're just going to have more and more money to build their program to be more competitive, and you're going to have less and less and less, and the gap just keeps getting wider between someone that's at a lower level trying to get there and those premier teams and drivers. So it's just that's the hardest part, and that's all the way down to the level that I race at. I mean, we have a budget that's limited, and we don't have new cars every year. We get a new car maybe every couple of years, and if we wreck a car really bad, we might not be able to go the next few races. And you don't see that in NASCAR, for example. A team wrecks a car, you just assume they have another car.
Hmm.
Um, at this level, you could be at the very top. You could be winning races and winning championships and things like the Snowball Derby. And at the snap of a finger, you could be sitting at home watching the next week because you can't go because you don't have the funding. So it's really hard on that side of it. Second hardest part, which really should be the hardest part, but unfortunately, the financial part always ends up being the hardest. But the second part is just, you know, figuring out what you need. Like what do you need in your car? What engine do you need to be the best opportunity to compete? What kind of car do you need to have that's fast? Um, having the right people around you that understand how to tune the car to make it go faster. Um, just it's all about information and technology in this day and age. It's you know you have to know what you're doing, and someone on your team has to know what to expect going into every race. So that's probably the second hardest part.
Yeah, probably. I could imagine it could get pretty hard doing all of that. But
Yeah,
kind of kind of going on from the hardest part. Now, what would you say like the easiest, like the your favorite part of racing? What would you say it is?
I would say the favorite part is just once you get all the other challenging pieces of this behind you, and you're at a race and everything's prepared and everything's taken care of, and now you can just go and even if it's not the best of days, even if you don't win, now you're at the track. You have total control of driving the car, and your team has total control of making the car handle the best they can, and it's all in your hands. And that's kind of fun for me to be able to show up on a race day, and maybe when you start the day you're a 10th place car and your goal is to win, right? So you're trying to get better, and everyone else is too. So it's like this race within the race to be able to get your car perfect for the actual feature race. And so that's probably the most fun part is just once you get to the track and you're just doing your thing, you're out there, and then you can start. The race starts, and now it's totally in the driver's hands. And the racing I do, we don't typically have pit stops. Normally, you start the race; it's usually around 100 laps or so, and you're not going to pit. So there's no coming in for tires if you burn the tires up. There's no coming in for adjustments if your car's not handling well. You got to do what you can with what you got. And so it puts on a good show. You can kind of preserve your car a little bit and ride maybe in mid pack and try to make a charge at the end of the race, which is exciting to watch. Or you can go and try to lead the whole race and just have the track position. So there's just short track racing provides a lot of strategy, and that's it can be a lot of fun. It can be frustrating at times too, but it's just fun to know it's kind of more in your control than what it is, let's say, in a 500-mile race when you're racing against all these very well-funded teams and things, and it's more of a impossible challenge, right? To you're a small team trying to compete against like Hendrick or Stuart Haas.
So yeah, don't really know how to like kind of transition my way into the next question, but
I'll just ask it.
I'm kind of I'm trying. It's getting kind of near to the end. It's kind of. Man, let me get my thoughts together.
No problem.
We're kind of getting to more than near the ending of the end of the interview. So I got a few more questions to ask you. I actually got my notes right here. So I think that might be. Oh, okay. So I was gonna ask you if you could pick any race to win. I know it's that you don't really get to pick what races you win, but if you could pick like really any race to win in like Cup Series or anything like that, what would you pick?
Man, that's a really good question. I think honestly one of the races that I would have said a year ago would be like the Snowball Derby, honestly. And so now having won that race, that's a really fulfilling thing in my career to be able to say that we accomplished. And would love to do it again, but that was a big deal to us because that was, even though it's still short track racing, you still have one of the most competitive races in the world. I mean, it's just you have a mixture of talent from the top tier of every walk of life of motorsports, basically. So that's a really big one. But in NASCAR type in NASCAR world, I would call it. I think it would be really cool to win. Any road course race. They seem like they're really challenging and really competitive. Those would be cool. I'd really love to maybe win like a Southern 500 at Darlington. A lot of the NASCAR races have gotten to be kind of, the best car gets out front and it's kind of hard to pass and everyone's pretty equal on speed. But you go to a place like Darlington and it puts a lot of the control back in the driver's hands. It's a very tricky track. The track's not very smooth like it could be. So the handling of the car is a lot more dictated by the driver instead of the car than what it is at other tracks sometimes. So, a race like the Southern 500 would be really cool. Even Charlotte, is trickier than most places. So it'd be cool to win one of those marquee events in NASCAR at a place like that.
Yeah, I could imagine it. I wonder what it would be like to win one of those really popular races and racing.
Yep.
That'd be cool. But
Yeah.
so yeah, that's about all the questions I got. So I have
All right.
asked. So you thank you for being on here. You put a lot of insight and answer the questions really well.
All right. Well, no problem, man. I appreciate you having me on, and hopefully it turns out really well.
Thank you.
All right, buddy. Thank you. See ya.
See ya.